Have you ever picked up a book because everybody else loved it, and then you read it and realized you might not be the target audience? For my February wrap-up, I'm gonna give you a one-sentence setup for the books that I read, let you know who I think they're for, and then recommend some other titles that might help you decide if the books that I read might be for you. Welcome back to Espresso Shots and Epic Plots. I'm Genevieve. Grab your favorite beverage, maybe still in a Christmas mug like mine, even though it's March, and let's answer the question of who the heck is that book for? I'm going to start off this wrap-up with One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. In this book, we have Elsbeth Spindle, so talk about an interesting name. Elsbeth Spindle must navigate a mist-shrouded kingdom to find 12 magical providence cards that can break a dark curse, all while concealing an ancient sentient monster trapped within her mind. This was a very quick, low brain power fantasy, a turn your brain off story, if you will. This would be a really good book for people that want an easy fantasy read that doesn't have a lot of dense world building in it. People who enjoy unique magic systems, but with a lighter execution, I would say. You might not love this if you prefer deeper, proactive protagonists and more character development. I personally was not a fan of this. I gave this 2.25 stars. If you liked The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, which I did also enjoy, you might like this. If you liked Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber, you might also like this. Now notice both of those titles are considered YA fantasy. That's one of the reasons I didn't like this. This read very YA to me, which I was not expecting. I think The Cruel Prince has the same dark gothic vibe that this is trying to give off, and the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, I enjoyed that enough to keep reading the series. I didn't end up keeping all of the books for Once Upon a Broken Heart, but it is a very similar, easy, quick read to Once Upon a Broken Heart. Personally, I was not a fan of our protagonist in this book. I thought she was very, very helpless and did not try to persevere through anything. But if you like The Cruel Prince and Once Upon a Broken Heart, you might want to check this out. And it is only a duology, so you're not committing to a huge series. I, however, will not be continuing in this series. Next up, I read And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. 10 strangers trapped on an isolated island are systematically murdered in accordance with a nursery rhyme by a killer punishing them for their hidden crimes. So this was a quick, focused read, a wait, who did it? You didn't even know until the end of the book. People have said that if you want to put on your little detective hat and try to figure out who did this, it's plausible in a lot of Agatha Christie books. That's not how I read, and so I didn't even try to figure out who it was, but you do know by the end of the book, so that was satisfying. This is definitely a book for classic mystery lovers, readers who enjoy like closed circuit, nobody can go anywhere, puzzly type of mystery, so that's who this book is for, and people who prefer like psychological tension over gore. While people were being murdered in this book, it wasn't overly gory. Most of the thriller vibe of it comes from like the psychological tension of who's going to be next and why did they do it. You might not love this if you don't enjoy older writing styles and older writing ideals. Personally, I gave this a 3.5. It was very short. It was engaging. It had a lot of interesting characters in a small book. There, we did feel like we learned about all of these different people in a very short amount of time. However, personally, the history and backstory and racial issues and misogyny, because it's an older book, I don't vibe well with those older writing styles. This would be a good book to read if you enjoyed The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Hurton, which I did read and enjoy. That is another puzzly closed, everybody's in one location type of mystery. And I think another more modern psychological thriller that is comparable to this would be The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. So if you read The Silent Patient and enjoyed that, you might like the psychological thriller aspect of And Then There Were None. I also also read Network Effect, which is the 6th book in the Murderbot series by Martha Wells. This is the first full-length book in the Murderbot series. All of the previous books are novellas, and all of the books after this are novellas. She has a new one coming out later this year as part of the Murderbot series, and I think that will also be a novella, but this particular one was a full-length 12-hour audio and I think 400 some odd page book. So we're following our antisocial security unit Murderbot as he has to again rescue his favorite humans. This time he's rescuing the daughter of one of his favorite humans from a mysterious alien threat, and now he's doing it with a friend from his past. So we get to see some characters from previous books show up. Again, like much of the other Murderbot books, the snark level is high with this one. This book is good for sci-fi readers who like sarcastic AI robots, AI protagonists, or just, you know, sarcastic protagonists in general. People who want action but also don't want to lose their character depth. This is good for people who read the other Murderbot books. This is a really good continuation of the series, but you might not like this book if you dislike action-heavy sci-fi. I gave this 4.25 stars. It was definitely not my favorite one in the series so far, although obviously over 4 stars is a very good rating. I do like these in more smaller, bite-sized chunks. This book did have a lot of action, and I'm one of those people that, you know, in movies and in books, when the action keeps going on too much, I kind of lose track of who's kicking where and who's fighting who and all that fun stuff. And there were a couple other components of this book where I kept reading it going, am I supposed to know what's going on? Like, is this information, did I miss a book? And I did end up doing some Googling without spoiling anything to make sure that I didn't accidentally like miss something completely, which does not happen in a lot of the other books. So that's why I put this one a little bit lower, but I did still love Murderbot. I did still love our sec unit and his relationship with the other characters. As I mentioned, he's actually working with the daughter of one of the other characters from the previous books, and so it was really great to learn more about other people. If you read All Systems Red and the other Murderbot books, you should definitely read this. Also, if you read and enjoyed Andy Weir's books like Project Hail Mary and The Martian, Andy Weir's really good at writing sci-fi with satire, so this falls into that same category. And then if you read and enjoyed A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers, that's a more cozy, lighthearted style of book, but it is following a human-robot connection where they talk about personhood and identity, and, you know, it is a short, little, nice book the same way that a lot of the other Murderbot books are. So even though their vibe is a little bit different, I do think that at their heart, there's a lot of similar messages in those books. The next book, I must have given my copy to my mom because I don't have it, and I do vaguely remember saying I think she would like it, so I'm hoping I passed it off to her because I can't find it on any of my shelves, and I really enjoyed it. The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love by India Holton. This was the book that I read for my blind date unwrapping read down my TBR book for February, so if you haven't seen that vlog, make sure you check it out. I'll link it here. 2 rival magical ornithologists compete to find a legendary bird, only to discover that their professional sabotage is no match for their romantic attraction. So this was a slightly flirty, silly little chaos book, a lighthearted afternoon read that doesn't take itself too seriously. This is really good for readers who like absurd, whimsical fantasy romance, emphasis on the romance and a little bit of emphasis on the fantasy. This is for fans of witty banter and light enemies to lovers. They weren't as diehard enemies as I've seen in other books. And then also for readers who enjoy playful historical fantasies. You don't know how many times I just tried to say that and it would not come out of my mouth. You might not like this if you aren't into chaotic, suspend your disbelief, whimsical type of humor. I would definitely check out The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love if you enjoyed books like The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sango Mandana. Similarly, both of these books are heavier on the romance than they are on the fantasy side. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett is another one that brings in that academic component. Similar to the Emily Wilde series, there were fun little footnotes and side commentary written in this book that made you feel like the academic component of this magical fantasy world was just as important to our protagonists as it was to us. If you read and enjoyed An Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer, this could be a good book for you to check out. Personally, I really enjoyed The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love. I gave it 4.75 stars. I did not enjoy The Assistant to the Villain. The reason I recommend it is because they are both books that don't take themselves seriously. In An Assistant to the Villain, or Assistant to the Villain, I can't remember exactly what it's called. In the Assistant to the Villain book series, it's not taking itself seriously. In my opinion, in that book, it didn't work quite well. There were some things that needed tweaked, but I did enjoy the way the book didn't take itself seriously in The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love. But if you enjoyed the one, I suspect you might enjoy the other. Maybe you'll enjoy it more. Along the same lines, I also read Paladin's Hope in February. This is the third in the Saint of Steel series by T. Kingfisher. Here we have a paladin of a dead god and a cynical forensic investigator who team up to solve a series of gruesome supernatural murders while navigating their own complicated feelings for one another. This book also has it's almost like I don't want to call it a trial. It's not a trial. They go through a series of complicated puzzles in this book that was really interesting. It was a unique twist in this series. So this is definitely a comfort read with some fantasy. Again, I think it's a good balance of romance and fantasy. I suppose it leads slightly more romance than fantasy. This is book 3 in the series, so we already have a pretty good foundation of what the fantasy is that's going on with the magical events. It's warm, but it's definitely not fluffy. There are some parts that are really creepy and that get very tense. It is a cozy book, but it's not so cozy that you don't care. You might not like this if you want an epic world-spanning fantasy. If you read Paladin's Grace and Paladin's Strength, then I think you would enjoy this. Other T. Kingfisher books that have a similar vibe would be Nettle and Bone and Thornhedge. So books that are lighter, but also darker, you still care enough to keep reading types of books. And then another good comp title would be if you liked Legends and Lattes, but you're looking for a little bit more story, a little bit more danger, a little bit more plot, then this would be a good series to pick up. I mentioned this is the third one in the series. Each book is episodic. It's about a different paladin. However, I do recommend reading them in order because there is an overarching story that follows through all of them that you wouldn't need to know to read this book, but there are components that you would be confused if you didn't know what was going on. The final book that I read in February was Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. In a dystopian America where prisoners fight to the death on live TV for a chance at freedom, two star competitors must navigate their love for each other and the systemic cruelty of the game. This was an intellectual gut punch. This is not a cozy Sunday read. This is a stare at the ceiling when you're done reading type of book. This book left me with a book hangover when I was done. This would be good for readers who enjoy dystopian fiction that has a really sharp social commentary. This would be good for people who enjoy books with very near future dystopia that feels uncomfortably real, like if we just let the world proceed as it is, we might get to this awful place. And you might not like this if you can't handle gore and brutality, because this was definitely hard to read at a lot of times for many different reasons in many different ways. Some comparable titles in some ways would be The Power by Naomi Alderman. That's another dark speculative fiction that focuses more on gender norms and power and societal structures. I read the book, but I know they turned it into an Amazon series. I think it might have been a mini series. I haven't seen the series, so I don't know if it's any good, but the book was very enjoyable. And then obviously a classic, The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood is another good literary dystopian book with a very sharp political commentary on female rights, essentially. A short story that I read that had some similar vibes to this, there was an Amazon short story series that focused on time and time travel, and P. Jelly Clark wrote a short story for that series called Chronos that was really good and featured BIPOC characters in some specific time travel scenarios that had a very this could happen type of feel to it that reminded me in some ways of this book. And I'm definitely planning on checking out some more of his writing. Short stories can kind of give you a little hint at how some people's other works are. And when I read that, I really enjoyed it. I read that short story before I read this, and there were I could see a lot of parallels in like how it made me feel and how it made me think. So I want to make sure I check out some of his other works. So hopefully you saw yourself in one of the stories that I mentioned. Hopefully I've encouraged you to add something to your TBR or take something off of your TBR, maybe if you found something that didn't quite sound like it was for you. If I didn't, tell me what kind of reader you are in the comments. Make sure you give a like and subscribe. Check out our next video where I'm gonna teach my mom how to use Goodreads, and maybe I'll teach you something that you don't already know too. Until then, happy reading. Compete to find a legendary rare bird. Okay, dude, your tail is in the video. Yeah, get your tail out of the video. Your body can be in the video, but not your tail. No. Keep walking, or sit down. Sit down. Okay, playful historical fantasies. I'm gonna kick you out. Lay down. You're about to get kicked out. Thank you. This book works. No. What are you doing? Pick somewhere to go. Do you want in my lap? Just lay down. Tale by Margaret Atwood. You're killing me, bro. Go away.